In the silence of ancient times, long before books, paper, or clocks, when the world was lit by the glow of torches and evenings were filled with the sounds of lyres and crackling fires, people gathered together around campfires, on temple steps, in quiet corners of fields and gardens, to listen to stories. These tales were more than mere entertainment. They were a bridge between humanity and the universe, an attempt to explain the inexplicable. This is how myths were born. The myths of ancient Greece are not just stories about gods and monsters. They reflect humanity's deep need to understand who we are, where we come from, and where we are going. In these stories lie strength and weakness, love and betrayal, fate and free will. Through myth, people explained thunder and lightning, earthquakes and harvests, but also fear, passion, honor, and shame. A myth is a mirror of the soul, told in the language of symbols, images, and wonders. One of the most powerful and complex symbols in the Greek pantheon was a hero named Heracles. His name is familiar even to those who have never read the Iliad or the Odyssey, who don't know who Zeus is, or who can't tell Athena from Artemis. Heracles is a name that echoes through millennia, remaining a symbol of strength, courage, pain, and redemption. But why him? Why not Perseus, Orpheus, Achilles, or Odysseus? Why was Heracles' story so compelling that it became eternal? Heracles was neither a god nor entirely human. He was born of Zeus, the supreme god of Olympus, and Alcmene, a mortal woman. This union gave rise to a hero who would spend his life balancing between two worlds, the divine and the human. He was stronger than any man, yet he suffered like one. He could defeat a monster, but he could not escape the pain of jealousy, betrayal, or guilt. The story of Heracles is not just a series of heroic deeds. It is a journey of the soul, a path from a birth marked by a goddess's enmity to a painful death and, ultimately, deification. It is a journey full of struggle, not only with monsters, but with himself. A path where physical strength proves meaningless without spiritual resilience. In different eras, the myth of Heracles was interpreted in various ways. For the ancient Greeks, he embodied arete, the ideal of virtuous excellence. He was someone who fought not for glory, but because it was his destiny. His labors were both a punishment and an opportunity for purification. His strength was not a gift, but a burden. He suffered, erred, and made mistakes, and it was precisely this that made him relatable to all. Later in Roman times, he became Hercules, a hero of victories, a man of action. His image transformed into a more straightforward symbol, a protector, a warrior, almost flawless. Yet even in this altered form, something deeply human remained. He was the one who carried burdens, endured, and ultimately triumphed. In later centuries, in art and literature, Heracles became an archetype, the image of a person passing through suffering and overcoming it to reach a new state. He was a symbol of strength, not arrogant or cruel, but suffering and transformative. A hero whose masculinity lay not in domination, but in the ability to endure and not break. This dreamy, nocturnal lecture about Heracles is not just a tale of an ancient hero. It is a journey into a world where gods can be cruel and capricious, and humans vulnerable yet infinitely strong. It is a story of how courage is born from fear, how resilience emerges from pain, and how, even in the most hopeless circumstances, a person can move forward. Each of Heracles' 12 labors hides a symbol. Each holds a lesson. Slaying the lion is like conquering fear. Cleaning the stables is like accepting the world's filth, and striving to improve it. Capturing monsters is like taming inner demons, and descending into the underworld for Cerberus is like facing death itself. But before we embark on this path, let's pause for a moment. Close your eyes. Imagine Greece, not the tourist version, but the mythical one. No resorts, no cities. Picture mountains and forests, misty dawns and warm evenings. Imagine Olympus where gods argue, watching over mortal fates. Imagine quiet fields where a lone man walks with a club in hand facing monsters, kings, gods, and above all, himself. This journey will be long. But if you stay with me, you'll hear more than just a story. You'll hear ancient memory, a voice echoing through time, a voice that doesn't judge, demand, or frighten, a voice that simply tells, so you can fall asleep peacefully, knowing even the greatest heroes were vulnerable. And that's exactly why they were great. Far in the depths of the ancient world, under the clear skies of Argos, in the city of Thebes, a story was born, one destined to become among the most significant in the myths of Hellas. A story about a hero whose name would outlive centuries. His path began with intrigue, jealousy, divine intervention, and tragic inevitability. It was a path no one consciously chose, yet it became his fate. The fate of Heracles Alcmene, a mortal woman, was renowned for her beauty and virtue. She was the wife of Amphitryon, a brave warrior and king, but her destiny was forever altered by an encounter with a god. Zeus, the supreme ruler of Olympus, gazing down on human affairs, was captivated by her. One night, while Amphitryon was away on a campaign, Zeus took the form of her husband and descended from the heavens. He extended the night threefold, stretching it for as long as needed to conceive a new being, neither fully god nor fully human. Thus, Heracles was conceived in Alcmene. His name at birth was Alcaeus. The name Heracles would come later, an irony as it means glory of Hera. Yet Hera, Zeus's wife, despised the infant with all her immortal being. He was living proof of her husband's infidelity, a reminder of even a goddess's powerlessness before the desires of the king. Of gods, Zeus, knowing the child would be great, sought to grant him immortality. He devised a ruse. In Hera's absence, he brought the infant to her breast, so she, unaware, would nurse him with her divine milk. But Hera's breast was not meant for another woman's child. Her milk was so potent that when the baby pushed, away a stream shot into the sky, scattering across the heavens as the Milky Way. Furious, Hera resolved to destroy the infant. While Heracles was still in his cradle, she sent 2 enormous serpents to strangle him. But even in infancy, Heracles proved he was no ordinary child. He seized the snakes, one in each tiny hand, and effortlessly choked them. Alcmene and Amphitryon rushed in at the sound, but instead of horror, they found a smiling baby with the lifeless bodies of the serpents beside him. From that moment, it was clear. Heracles' fate would be unlike that of any mortal. His childhood was far from ordinary. Amphitryon, raising the boy, summoned the finest teachers in Hellas. Heracles studied music, writing, horsemanship, archery, wrestling, and swordsmanship. But his spirit was wild, untamed, like a river in spring. His strength often spiraled out of control. Once, during a music lesson, his teacher, Linus, struck his hand for playing a wrong note. In response, Heracles, unaware of his own power, struck Linus with his lyre, killing him instantly. This was the first time his strength turned tragic. After this incident, Amphitryon realized Heracles could not be raised like an ordinary son. He sent him to the mountains, not in exile, but to learn to live among nature with shepherds and beasts, far from palace rules and constraints. There, he learned to hunt, wear animal hides, and, by his youth, he looked like a grown man. Tall, broad-shouldered, with hands like the roots of an ancient tree. It was in his youth that Heracles faced his first symbolic choice. Around the age of 18, two women appeared before him. Whether in a dream or a vision, it mattered little. What mattered was that this moment encapsulated the essence of his future path. One woman was slender, dressed modestly, but with a face full of dignity. She called herself arete, virtue. The other was voluptuous, adorned with lavish jewels and a seductive smile, calling herself hedone, pleasure. Both offered him different paths. The first, a difficult, thorny road full of pain and trials, but leading to true glory, inner light, and respect. The second, an easy path of pleasures, fame without effort, a life of indulgence without suffering. Heracles chose the first, and in that choice lay his entire destiny. This myth of choosing between virtue and pleasure was beloved in antiquity. It was told to young men to inspire them toward valor. For Heracles, it was a prophecy. From that moment, his life became a series of trials, each making him stronger, not just physically, but spiritually. His youth ended tragically. During a hunt, he accidentally killed his teacher, and later, upon returning, he fell under the influence of gods, fate, and his own destiny. But even before the great cycle of labors, he was destined to marry and have children. He wed Megara, daughter of the Theban king. They had children, and it seemed happiness was within reach. But Hera had not forgotten. She never forgot. In a fit of madness induced by the goddess, Heracles killed his own children. Unaware of his actions, shrouded in rage, he destroyed what he loved most. When he came to, horror and remorse consumed him. He was not just broken, he was shattered. From this point began a new chapter in his life, the chapter of redemption. To cleanse himself of guilt, he journeyed to Delphi, to the oracle, the sacred voice of Apollo. There he asked how to atone for his sins. The answer was clear and terrifying. He must serve King Eurystheus, who would assign him tasks to test him, 12 labors, each meant to be impossible. Only by completing this path could Heracles find purification, peace, and forgiveness. And so began the part of the myth known to many, the labors of Heracles. But behind them lay not only heroism, but pain. Not only strength, but the need to atone. He did not seek glory. He sought release from guilt. And that is what makes his labors so profound. Before we move forward, close your eyes. Picture a tall man in a lion's skin, a club in hand, and in his eyes pain. Not anger, not pride, but deep human pain. He is not a hero on a pedestal. He is a man striving to become something more, even at the cost of everything he had. After the slaying of his children, in the ashes of grief and despair, Heracles came to the Delphic oracle seeking purification. The voice of Apollo declared, "Go to King Eurystheus of Tiryns, serve him, fulfill all he demands, only then can you cleanse your soul of guilt." Thus began the path of redemption, the path of 12 labors. Not for glory, for peace. Eurystheus was not just a king, he was cowardly, envious, and secretly terrified of Heracles. Yet he was chosen by the gods to dictate the hero's fate. And the first task was one that seemed impossible. First labor, the Nemean lion. Wendy, Heracles was sent on his first labor. The task seemed daunting. He was to slay the monstrous lion that dwelt in Nemea, an ancient Greek city, terrorizing the surrounding lands. This lion was no ordinary beast, but a creature of magical power. Its hide was so tough that no sword or arrow could pierce it. Conventional weapons had no effect, and many heroes before Heracles had tried and failed to defeat it. Upon first seeing the lion, Heracles realized he needed more than ordinary weapons. He was not only strong but clever, quickly understanding that the only way to defeat the beast was to use his strength and adaptability. The lion was ferocious and merciless. It attacked people, tearing them apart, crushing their bodies in its grip. It was not just terrifying, but symbolized the chaos ravaging these lands. The locals lived in constant fear. Heracles was determined to end this evil, and to do so, he had to fight on a level no mortal was expected to reach. He armed himself with a massive club, but as soon as he faced the lion, he realized it wasn't enough. Heracles charged into battle, but the lion was so swift and cunning that dodging its attacks was nearly impossible. It tried to flank him, leaping at him, but Heracles nimbly evaded and countered. Yet, despite all his strength, he couldn't pierce the lion's hide. Realizing conventional weapons were useless, Heracles decided to use the terrain. He cornered the lion in a ravine, forcing it to fight in a confined space. This gave Heracles an advantage. He could react faster to its attacks and found a way to grapple it. But even then, the lion wouldn't yield. This was not just a battle with a beast, it was a fight against nature itself, against forces that seemed invincible. Heracles noticed the lion's neck, where the muscles and skin were slightly weaker than elsewhere. Using his incredible strength, he seized the lion by the throat and strangled it. When the lion died, Heracles not only defeated the beast, but showed the world that his strength and resolve could overcome any obstacle. Yet his victory didn't end there. After slaying the lion, Heracles faced another challenge, retrieving its hide. The impervious skin was nearly impossible to cut, even with the sharpest blades. But Heracles, ever resourceful, used the lion's own claws, still sharp after death, to slice through the hide and craft it into armored clothing. From that moment, the Nemean lion's skin became a symbol of his triumph, accompanying him through all his future labors. It was not just armor, but a testament to his strength and invincibility. Thus ended Heracles' first labor, showcasing his courage, resolve, and ingenuity. He didn't rely solely on strength, but used it wisely. From this moment, Heracles became known as the hero capable of defeating even the most terrifying and insurmountable monsters. He became a symbol of readiness to face any challenge, no matter how impossible it seemed. Second labor, the Lernaean Hydra. The Lernaean Hydra was one of the most fearsome monsters Heracles faced. This terrifying creature dwelt in the swamps of Lerna in ancient Greece. The Hydra was a serpentine beast with multiple heads, each dripping with deadly venom. But its appearance paled beside its most horrifying trait. If one head was severed, several more would grow back in its place. Destroying the Hydra was nearly impossible, and even seasoned warriors and heroes who had tried before Heracles failed. Heracles knew this labor would be his toughest yet, facing trials that could break his spirit. But he was not only strong, but wise, understanding that victory required all his skill and willpower. When he reached the Lerna swamp, he found the Hydra didn't just lurk in the misty bogs, It actively hunted all living things around it. Heracles saw its long, writhing body and numerous heads swaying in the fog, emerging from the water and coiling around anything in its path. Each glimpse of the monster filled his soul with dread, but he couldn't retreat. His goal was clear: defeat the Hydra and rid the world of this evil. He armed himself with a sword and shield, but soon realized they weren't enough. Heracles quickly assessed the situation. Each severed head spawned new ones, making simple decapitation futile. The Hydra was not just a dangerous beast, it was an evil that couldn't be vanquished by standard means. Heracles had to find a way to stop the heads from regrowing, requiring precision and focus. He began attacking the Hydra, slashing at its heads, trying to cut off as many as possible, but each severed head birthed new ones. His strength began to wane, and he realized victory required a solution. Unexpected help came from his loyal friend Iolaus. Iolaus offered to use fire to prevent the heads from regenerating. Heracles soon devised a plan. He would cut off each head and immediately cauterize the stump with a burning torch. It was a risky strategy, but he had no choice. With each severed head, Iolaus seared the neck, preventing regrowth. The battle raged with ferocious intensity. Heracles was surrounded by heads, and the Hydra struck with its venomous breath and bites. But with each victory, Heracles grew more determined. He continued severing heads and cauterizing necks. Though the monster resisted, sprouting new heads, Heracles ultimately prevailed, decapitating all its heads and destroying its body. However, the Hydra's final head was particularly fearsome. It was immortal. Heracles couldn't destroy it with ordinary weapons and had to use all his strength and wisdom to immobilize it. Using his agility and skill, he pinned the immortal head, rendering it motionless forever. This labor was especially significant, showcasing not only Heracles' physical strength, but his ability to solve problems with intellect. After defeating the Hydra, Heracles took its venomous blood and used it to create weapons that would serve him in future labors. In memory of his victory, he kept the Hydra's head, a symbol of his ability to overcome the most terrifying threats. This labor was Heracles' second trial. He not only vanquished a monster, but learned to use his strength and wisdom in critical situations. He showed that even an immortal threat could be overcome. The Hydra, once invincible, was defeated not just by Heracles' courage, but by his resolve and determination to triumph despite all odds. Third labor. The Ceryneian Hind. The Ceryneian Hind was no ordinary animal. It was a sacred creature dedicated to Artemis, goddess of the hunt. The hind was incredibly swift, with golden antlers that were both beautiful and divine. It embodied the harmony and rapid grace of nature. Myths claimed it was so fast that no skill or strength could catch it. Even Artemis herself guarded it, ensuring no one could capture it without divine consent. For Heracles, this labor was a true test. He had to capture the Ceryneian hind alive, a task far from simple. On one hand, he knew the creature was tied to the gods, and capturing it could have consequences. On the other, his mission was clear. Bring the hind to Mycenae. Heracles began by heading to the mountains where the hind dwelled. The forest it inhabited was deep and mysterious. He quickly realized success depended not only on strength, but on patience. The hind was so swift that chasing it down was nearly impossible. This labor demanded not just agility, but the ability to anticipate the hind's behavior. For days, Heracles tracked the hind, noting its traces but always staying far enough not to startle it. The hind moved so quickly that any attempt to catch it through force would fail. Despite his physical prowess, Heracles understood he needed to be cunning and patient. He had to learn the hind's habits, follow it, and use its own speed against it. Weeks passed, and Heracles was nearly exhausted from the long pursuit. Yet his persistence never wavered. He knew that rushing or startling the hind would make it vanish into the woods, rendering his efforts futile. Instead of hastening, he slowed down, acting more cautiously, like a hunter awaiting the perfect moment. At one point, after hours of tracking, the hind slowed. Heracles, now familiar with its movements, sensed the moment for action. He crept closer, moving silently. The hind sensed him, but Heracles managed to get near. When he was close enough, he made a decisive leap and captured it, though with great difficulty. This moment was the culmination of their long chase. The hind was caught alive, as required, and Heracles brought it to Mycenae. But more importantly, this labor taught Heracles a lesson. Strength isn't always the only path to victory. Sometimes patience and timing are key, yet the gods did not ignore Heracles. Though he followed the task's rules, he faced Artemis's wrath, as the hind was sacred. Seeing it captured, Artemis expressed her displeasure, but since Heracles acted under orders, she spared him vengeance. She simply warned him to return the hind. Thus, Heracles not only completed the task, but faced the need to return the hind to its natural habitat, a vital lesson. This labor proved his strength and patience, and taught him that even a great hero cannot violate nature's sacred laws. Fourth labor, the Erymanthian boar. The Erymanthian boar was no mere beast. It was a creature so powerful and dangerous that, even in the remote Lycian mountains, all feared it. Known for its immense strength and ferocious temperament, the boar was a true threat to the region. It wasn't just feared, it destroyed everything in its path, ruining crops and attacking people and animals. Like many mythological creatures, the Erymanthian boar was created to challenge the bravest heroes, and Heracles could not avoid this trial. His task was to capture the boar alive and deliver it to Mycenae. This was a significant mission, as the boar was a genuine menace and its capture was deemed a great feat. Knowing the boar lived in mountains where animal tracks were easily hidden among forests and ridges, Heracles began his journey, preparing to face this dangerous creature. As an experienced hunter, he knew capturing such a beast required not just physical strength, but cunning. The boar was not only massive, but incredibly fast, so its capture demanded intelligence. Heracles arrived in the Erymanthian mountains, known for their harsh climate and impassable forests. This wild, secluded place was the boar's refuge. He knew his task was not just to catch the beast, but to do so alive. While his strength was his greatest weapon, he had to be cautious not to harm the boar and fulfill Eurystheus's command. For days and nights Heracles tracked the boar. Its trail was clear, marked by trampled vegetation and large hoof prints. Everything around bore the boar's heavy tread, sparing neither animals nor plants. Yet, despite its size and ferocity, Heracles remained patient. He knew a hasty capture would squander his chance. After weeks of intense hunting, Heracles finally encountered the Erymanthian boar. It was enormous, its body covered in thick bristles, with tusks long enough to pierce any warrior's armor. Its eyes burned with rage as it spotted Heracles, but the hero didn't rush into battle. He waited for the right moment. The boar was cunning and swift, leaving deep tracks, but Heracles eventually found its lair, where it rested, to avoid startling the beast. Heracles began setting a trap, using the landscape's natural features and trees. He knew the boar couldn't stay still for long. When it sensed its corner was surrounded, it charged furiously at Heracles, trying to destroy everything in its path. But Heracles was ready. Using his strength, he herded the boar into a prepared trap, a deep pit covered with branches and leaves. The boar, unaware, fell in. This was the moment Heracles took control. He brought the Erymanthian boar to Mycenae alive, as commanded. But the journey back held another challenge. The boar was so fierce that even bound and caged, it kept trying to break free. Heracles knew he had to return with the beast, but the path was fraught with danger. When Heracles presented the boar to Eurystheus, the king couldn't hide his shock. He was stunned that the hero had captured such a dangerous creature. Yet, while Heracles earned fame and recognition for this labor, his trials were only beginning. Each labor was not just a victory, but a reminder that his strength and resolve pushed him toward ever greater challenges. The Erymanthian boar symbolized the power and unpredictability of wild nature. Its capture showed Heracles that physical strength alone isn't always enough. Sometimes victory requires cunning, patience, and ingenuity. This labor was not just proof of his might, but a lesson he'd carry throughout his life. Fifth labor, the Augean stables. The task assigned to Heracles for his fifth labor seemed less dangerous than his previous trials, yet it was just as challenging and required exceptional skill. Heracles was to clean the Augean stables, vast structures housing thousands of horses. This was no mere cleaning job. The task was to remove an immense amount of manure accumulated over decades. Augeas, king of Elis, was known for his wealth and generosity, as well as his enormous herd of horses, which brought him great profit. But despite his riches, he was a negligent ruler who ignored his stables. Uncleaned for years, they became an environmental disaster. The manure stank, creating unbearable conditions, and had grown so vast it blocked access to the stables. Eurystheus, ever eager to make Heracles' life difficult, gave him this task, knowing it seemed simple, but was a test of patience and ingenuity. Cleaning the stables of such filth was nearly impossible, and Heracles was told to do it in a single day. The task was daunting not just for its scale but for its time constraint. Undeterred, Heracles accepted the challenge. He wasted no time, knowing he had to act swiftly to meet the deadline. Instead of tackling the manure with shovels or other manual tools, Heracles decided to use his intellect and resourcefulness, which had often aided him. He knew he had to leverage what was available. Heracles turned to a river flowing near the stables and devised a brilliant plan. He dug 2 channels to divert the river's water into the stables. These channels allowed him to control the flow, which washed away massive amounts of manure. This method was so effective that even the most inaccessible corners of the stables were cleared. The work was messy and grueling, but Heracles cleaned the stables in one day. In hours, the filth-ridden structures became clean and orderly. Heracles proved that his mind and ingenuity, alongside his strength, could tackle the most unconventional tasks. When Eurystheus saw Heracles had completed this monumental task, he was stunned. He expected Heracles to spend days or weeks, but the hero finished in a day. This labor was another example of how Heracles could solve even the toughest problems with knowledge and cunning. However, despite his success, Heracles was not rewarded for this labor. When Eurystheus saw how quickly the stables were cleaned, he suspected Heracles used the river, not manual labor, violating the labor's terms. Eurystheus refused to recognize the labor as complete, claiming Heracles relied on an external resource. Heracles couldn't let this labor be dismissed. so he continued his struggle with Eurystheus. But this trial also reminded him that even the most daunting tasks could be solved not just with strength, but with wisdom, innovation, and unconventional thinking. Thus, cleaning the Augean stables showed Heracles could tackle problems with cunning and resourcefulness, not just might. This labor reminded all that even the most overwhelming issues could be resolved with intelligence and patience. Sixth labor, the Stymphalian birds. One of Heracles' most dangerous and terrifying labors was the sixth, tasked with destroying a flock of Stymphalian birds. These were no ordinary creatures, but monstrous predators infesting the lands around Lake Stymphalia in Arcadia, their home and base for attacks. The flock was so vast that their assaults threatened both locals and the region's nature. The Stymphalian birds were notorious for their ferocious behavior and venomous feathers, which they could hurl with deadly accuracy. These feathers caused grievous wounds and poisoned their victims. The birds had massive beaks, and their cries were so loud and menacing that fear of them was part of their power. Terrified locals fled their homes, seeking refuge elsewhere. Heracles was assigned this labor because no one else could handle such a monstrous foe. His task was to eliminate the birds and rid the region of their threat. But even the great hero knew his strength and courage alone wouldn't suffice. To defeat the Stymphalian birds, he needed help. Heracles sought divine counsel, knowing he'd need more than weapons, special tools. The goddess Athena, answering his plea, gave him unique bronze castanets. Crafted from bronze, they produced a loud, sharp sound that could scare the birds. This clever, unconventional tool was needed to draw the birds from their hiding spots, preventing attacks on the hero. Upon arriving in Stymphalia, Heracles faced a nightmare. The flock was enormous. He used the castanets to create a resounding noise echoing through the mountains and lake, forcing the birds into the air. The sound drew their attention, and as usual, they began attacking. The battle was fierce and unrelenting. Heracles used not only his strength, but strategy. With the castanets, he gathered the birds in one place, then struck them with arrows. These birds weren't mere prey. They were formidable foes, hurling venomous feathers with precision, forcing Heracles to be cautious. But his agility and skill with ranged weapons led to victory. He also used cunning, herding the birds into a cluster for easier targeting. Heracles could have killed all the birds with arrows, but knowing some might survive and revive the threat, he used fire to destroy their remains, ensuring safety. In days, he cleared the lake and surrounding areas of these dangerous creatures. Upon returning, he earned praise not only from people but from the gods, who recognized he defeated such powerful foes with intellect, not just might. His ingenuity, strategic thinking, and reliance on more than brute force were key to this labor's success. Thus, destroying the Stymphalian birds was not just physical extermination, but an example of Heracles using wit and cunning to defeat even the most dangerous and deadly monsters. 6 labors, each a step on the road to redemption. Not just against monsters, against himself, against guilt, fear, and fate. Heracles didn't know what lay ahead, but he kept going. Not because he wanted to, but because he had to. In dreams, you can envision these images: the lion's skin gleaming in moonlight, the Hydra's venomous blood dripping slowly from arrowheads, the light tread of the Hind fleeing through groves. Each labor is like a dream, a shadow in the night, the quiet breath of fate. The path of redemption continued. Heracles, weary and silent, moved from trial to trial. 6 labors were behind him, but new ones loomed, more distant, more terrifying, more arduous. These were not just tasks, but thresholds to another world. Eurystheus didn't want Heracles to survive. He hoped each new labor would be his last. But the hero pressed on, without complaint, without pride, simply because he could do no other. Seventh labor, the Cretan bull. The seventh labor was no less daunting or dangerous than the others. Heracles was tasked with capturing the Cretan bull. This was no ordinary animal. It was massive, powerful, and nearly uncontrollable. A son of Poseidon, the bull was brought to Crete as a divine gift to showcase the god's might. But once on the island, it grew so wild and ferocious that no one could tame or control it. Heracles' mission was to capture the bull alive, unharmed, and bring it to Mycenae to demonstrate his power over the beast. As always, Heracles accepted the challenge and set out for Crete. Upon arriving, he realized capturing the bull would be no easy feat. It was immensely powerful, capable of smashing any obstacle in its path. Heracles tracked it for days, following broken trees and the bull's deep tracks. He finally found the bull in its lair, surrounded by stone walls and tall grass. Heracles knew brute force wouldn't suffice. He needed cunning and caution to capture the creature. Heracles chose to approach from an unexpected angle. He crept up from behind and seized the bull by its horns, using its aggression against it. It was a risky move as the bull was incredibly dangerous, yet Heracles held firm. Despite its immense strength and fury, capturing the bull alive was a true test. Heracles used all his skill and patience to keep it from breaking free or injuring itself. The struggle grew more intense with each hour, but he didn't relent. He subdued the bull, bound it, and began leading it back across Crete, despite its resistance. In the end, Heracles brought the Cretan bull to Mycenae, where it was to be presented to Eurystheus. But as always, the king was displeased. Eurystheus demanded the bull remain alive, not killed. With this condition, Heracles returned the bull to Crete, where it continued to live as a symbol of divine power. This labor was significant not just as a physical victory, but as a test of Heracles' character. He had to show resilience, patience, and the ability to solve problems with intellect, not just strength. Upon returning to Mycenae, his success was acknowledged, but the labor symbolized how great challenges could teach a hero to not only overcome obstacles, but redirect destructive forces for good. Eighth labor, the horses of Diomedes. The eighth labor tasked Heracles with capturing the horses of Diomedes, a cruel king who owned wild, dangerous, and bloodthirsty steeds. These horses were no ordinary animals. They were cursed with their master's evil and power. They fed on human flesh and were so ferocious that no one dared approach them. Diomedes was a king who ruled a warlike people known for his cruelty. His horses, like him, symbolized destruction and violence. He kept them chained, harnessing them to a chariot central to his military campaigns. Heracles' task was not just difficult but required strength, courage, and cunning, as capturing the horses meant defeating Diomedes himself. The goal was to seize the horses and bring them to Mycenae, showcasing the hero's might. Heracles set out, facing numerous obstacles before reaching Diomedes' land. He battled local forces guarding the horses and their master. Upon nearing, Heracles realized this was no mere fight but a test of endurance. Diomedes was formidable and facing him was daunting, yet Heracles didn't falter. He engaged Diomedes and his troops in battle, ultimately prevailing. Diomedes was slain and his savage horses became Heracles' prize. Capturing the horses was no simple task. Feeding on human flesh, they couldn't just be caught, they had to be tamed. Heracles a skilled animal tamer as well as a warrior, devised a clever plan to bind and subdue them. He led them to Mycenae, ensuring they didn't attack. His friend Philoctetes, a skilled archer, aided him, thwarting the horses' escape attempts by shooting at their heads and legs. The journey was fraught with challenges, but Heracles delivered the bloodthirsty horses to Mycenae. This labor was another victory, proving his strength and skill. The horses of Diomedes became a symbol of his courage and resolve, their capture one of the most thrilling chapters of his life. In Mycenae, the horses were tethered and displayed as a symbol of triumph. They showed all that even the fiercest creatures could be subdued by willpower and spirit. Ninth labor, the belt of Hippolyta. The ninth labor was among Heracles' most complex and perilous, requiring not just strength, but strategy, diplomacy, and bravery. He was tasked with obtaining the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. This belt was unique. Worn only by the queen, it symbolized her power and strength. It was a vital artifact, and acquiring it meant challenging the queen's authority. The Amazons, a tribe of warrior women, were renowned for their incredible strength, combat prowess, and courage. They lived in a remote land where men were forbidden. No one could match their martial skills, and Queen Hippolyta was considered nearly invincible. The belt's significance lay not only in its symbolism, but in its magical power, granting its wearer an edge in battle. Heracles set out for the Amazons' land, knowing a tough battle awaited. But before fighting, he sought to negotiate with Hippolyta. He sent envoys to explore obtaining the belt peacefully. Hippolyta, learning of Heracles' arrival, offered a deal. She'd give the belt if he defeated her in combat. It was a ruse, as she had no intention of parting with such a vital artifact. Heracles, despite his diplomatic efforts, soon faced resistance. The Amazons saw him as a threat to their power and attacked. The battle was long and bloody. The Amazons fought with fierce determination, forcing Heracles to use all his strength to prevail. But his courage and resilience made even the strongest warriors reconsider their opponent. Seeing her army couldn't defeat Heracles, Hippolyta agreed to surrender the belt, provided she remained safe. Heracles took the belt, but faced remaining Amazons trying to stop him. The ensuing battle was among the fiercest of his life. He emerged victorious, but paid a price, not just in combat, but in moral choices, fighting a proud, independent people. Returning to Mycenae with Hippolyta's belt, Heracles again proved his strength and resolve. This labor showed no obstacle, was too great, and he could defeat even the mightiest foes if duty demanded. The belt was not just a trophy, but a symbol of triumph over the formidable Amazons. It also taught Heracles that willpower and determination lead to victory, even through war and strife. 10th labor, the cattle of Geryon. The 10th labor was a true test of Heracles' physical endurance and patience, involving a journey to the world's farthest reaches to steal the cattle of Geryon, a monster no hero had faced. This labor was among the most epic, demanding strength, resilience, cunning, and survival in harsh conditions. Heracles traveled to the land of Geryon, a creature with 3 heads and 3 bodies fused into one. Geryon was not only terrifying but powerful, commanding an army of monsters and fearsome beings. He owned a herd of magnificent red cattle, his greatest treasure. These cattle were beautiful and fertile, and Geryon knew their value. Ordered by Eurystheus, Heracles had to steal the herd and bring it to Mycenae. The task seemed impossible as Geryon was not only strong, but lived on a remote island, making his cattle nearly inaccessible. This labor required immense effort, and the journey was perilous. Heracles first faced vast rivers and mountain passes. He encountered natural obstacles, from raging rivers to icy wastelands, where food and water were scarce. Yet he persevered, navigating these lands and adapting to brutal conditions with his strength and resolve. Upon reaching Geryon's island, new trials awaited. Geryon was guarded by allies, including the two-headed dog Orthrus, who watched the herd and numerous monsters protecting their master's wealth. Undaunted, Heracles fought Geryon and his forces, prevailing in several brutal battles to reach the monster. Geryon, facing Heracles, couldn't believe anyone would dare challenge him, but the hero was unrelenting. Their battle was long and bloody, but Heracles triumphed, slaying all three heads and bodies. Yet, even after victory, he faced another challenge, herding Geryon's cattle back through vast distances and obstacles. A warrior and strategist, Heracles found ways to bypass barriers, guiding the cattle to Mycenae while minimizing losses and avoiding unnecessary fights. His cunning and agility ensured success. Returning with the cattle to Mycenae, Heracles proved his resilience and ability to overcome any obstacle. This labor confirmed he could handle any challenge fate threw at him. He was not just a fighter, but a master of survival in the harshest conditions. 11th labor. The apples of the Hesperides. The 11th labor, retrieving the golden apples of the Hesperides, was among Heracles' most enigmatic and complex. These apples, said to grant immortality, grew in a garden guarded by magical beings and nature's might. Heracles had to overcome numerous obstacles and meet ancient gods to complete this task. The Hesperides, nymphs and daughters of the Titan. Atlas tended a garden hidden in the world's farthest reaches far to the east. The apples were a gift from Hera, goddess of marriage, and among her most prized treasures. Guarded not just as valuables, but as symbols of immortality and power, anyone who obtained one would gain eternal life. Heracles, a great hero, had to secure these apples to fulfill his mission. Heracles faced countless hardships before reaching the garden. His journey was long and grueling, seeking a place no one could pinpoint. The garden was protected not just by creatures, but by the ancient dragon Ladon who guarded the apple trees. To find the garden, Heracles met various mythological beings, some aiding him, others hindering. He first sought the sea god Nereus, who knew the garden's location. Nereus revealed Heracles would cross earthly realms and face monsters, complicating his quest. After many trials, Heracles reached the mountain where the Hesperides garden lay. There, he met Atlas, the Titan tasked with holding up the heavens. Atlas offered a deal. Heracles would relieve him of the heavens' weight temporarily in exchange for the apples. Heracles agreed, his strength sufficient to bear the burden. While Atlas rested, Heracles entered the garden and took the apples. But when it was time to return the heavens, Atlas plotted to betray him, intending to keep the apples and leave Heracles burdened. Cunningly, Heracles asked Atlas to hold the heavens briefly while he adjusted his stance. Atlas complied, and Heracles, seizing the moment, took the apples and left. Returning to Mycenae with the apples, Heracles completed the labor. His wit and resolve helped him navigate one of the trickiest tasks ever set before a hero. The apples were not just magical fruit, but a symbol that even the mightiest foes and obstacles could be overcome with intellect and strategy. This labor reminded all that solutions exist for even the toughest challenges with resolute action. 12th labor, Cerberus. The 12th and final labor was without doubt Heracles' most daunting and dangerous. He had to descend into the heart of the underworld, the realm of the dead, and bring back its most terrifying creature, Cerberus, the three-headed hound guarding Hades' gates. This labor was the culmination of his heroic journey, proving he could conquer not just earthly, but otherworldly obstacles. Cerberus in myth was a monster with 3 canine heads, a venomous serpent for a tail, and fur bristling with snakes. He guarded the underworld, ensuring no one entered or left without Hades' permission. His presence symbolized the boundary between life and death. So formidable was Cerberus that he kept the souls of the dead confined, preventing their return to the living world. The task seemed nearly impossible. Reaching Cerberus meant descending into the darkest, most terrifying realms of the underworld and capturing a creature capable of killing with a glance or bite required not just strength, but immense courage. Heracles set out, armed only with his power and determination. His journey to the underworld was fraught with perilous trials. He encountered numerous souls, some aiding him, others distracting him. He crossed the rivers Styx and Acheron, dividing the worlds of the living and dead, and reached Hades' palace, where the lord of the underworld greeted him. Hades, despite his sternness, knew Heracles was destined to fulfill his task and allowed him to proceed with one condition: he must take Cerberus alive, using no weapons and causing no harm. This was a colossal challenge, as capturing the beast without injuring it, given its ferocity, was nearly impossible. Facing Cerberus, Heracles' strength and resolve were pushed to their limits. Yet he didn't waver. He seized the hound by the throat, using his immense power to hold it despite its fierce resistance. Cerberus's 3 heads snapped at him, its serpent tail hissed, but Heracles subdued every attempt to break free. The task grew harder as the underworld began to quake from the struggle. Even Hades noticed his guardian risked destruction. But Heracles persisted, holding Cerberus. He not only defeated the beast, but did so without breaking his promise, causing no harm. With Cerberus subdued, Heracles returned to the living world. Emerging with the hound, he awed the world and fellow heroes with his bravery and resolve. This moment cemented his ability to overcome any obstacle, even those deemed impossible. Cerberus was returned to his post, and Heracles, completing his final labor, presented himself to Eurystheus, earning deserved recognition and concluding his arduous path. This labor symbolized that no barrier was too great for Heracles, be it monstrous beasts or the forces of death. He exemplified that a hero's true strength lies not just in physical might, but in spirit, resolve, and facing any trial head-on. 12 labors, 12 steps, from beasts to gods, forests to death's realm, madness to self-understanding. Heracles endured it all. He sought no reward, he expected no thanks, he simply wanted peace. In dreams you can imagine him standing by the sea's edge where sunset gilds the waves, the Hesperides apples glowing on the horizon, and behind him only a shadow. The shadow of a great journey. He stands at the sea's edge where waves lap the cliffs and the wind carries the scent of salt and thyme. His hands hang low, shoulders relaxed. He is no longer a hero. He is just a man. All trials are behind him. All that could be defeated, he defeated. All that could be lost, he lost. His name will live in songs and legends, but he, a weary traveler, has only one wish: to forget the pain, to sleep, to dissolve into silence. The sky above shifts. The sun sets slowly, as if for the last time. Evening drapes the horizon in a soft haze. For a moment, it seems even the gods look at him differently, not as a hero, but as a brother, one who endured all. In that moment, Heracles turns and walks along the shore. His steps make no sound, no trail follows, only the gentle sway of grass, and a shadow, long and calm, fading into twilight. And you, listener, can close your eyes. Reflect on how far this path stretches, how eternal the labors, how fleeting the pain. In dreams, heroes come, not to shout, but to sit silently beside you, to share the quiet. Heracles vanishes beyond the hill. All grows still, and night falls softly, as if cloaking you in a warm mantle. You are safe. All has been accomplished. Sleep soundly. When a person lives a great life, full of achievements, suffering, and labors, one final path always awaits. A path no one can guide, a path the hero walks alone. Even the mightiest, Heracles, like any mortal, grew weary. His body was strong, but his heart was tired. He had endured all: love, betrayal, toil, and glory. And in the end, as often happens in myths, fate struck again, suddenly and cruelly. After completing the 12 labors, Heracles lived among mortals. He married again to a beautiful woman named Deianira. She was kind, devoted, and seemed capable of giving him what he'd been, denied his whole life, peace. But even in peace the gods hide trials. Crossing a river, they met the centaur Nessus. He offered to carry Deianira to the other bank while Heracles swam across. But once out of Heracles' sight, Nessus tried to abduct her. In that instant, the hero's immortal wrath flared. He drew his bow, and an arrow struck the centaur. Mortally wounded, Nessus devised a sinister plan. Knowing he couldn't defeat Heracles by force, he sowed doubt in Deianira's heart. He told her his blood held magic. If smeared on clothing, it would rekindle Heracles' love, should it ever wane. Deianira memorized his words, keeping the potion, unaware that Nessus' blood was tainted with the Hydra's venom that killed him. Years passed. Then jealousy, the force that undoes even the strongest, crept into Deianira's heart. Heracles fell in love with another woman. Perhaps he didn't even realize his heart had shifted, but Deianira felt it. Hoping to reclaim his love, she recalled the potion and smeared it on a tunic, sending it to Heracles as a gift. Heracles donned the garment. The venom instantly began corroding his flesh. He writhed in agony but couldn't remove the tunic. It fused to his skin. Fire burned beneath his flesh, unquenchable. He knew this was the end, but he didn't beg. He didn't call for help. He was Zeus's son and met death as a god's son should. He ascended Mount Oeta, high and solitary, where the world nears the heavens. There he ordered a funeral pyre built and lay upon it. But no one dared light it. No one could bring themselves to end the hero's journey. Only one mortal, a shepherd named Philoctetes, dared fulfill Heracles' wish. He lit the pyre, and the flames rising to the sky were not an end, but a transformation. For in that moment, something reserved for the chosen occurred. Zeus, Heracles' father, watched from Olympus. He saw his son's suffering, his labors, his loyalty. He knew no mortal could bear such a divine burden without becoming divine. So he decreed, Heracles' soul must ascend. Thunder roared, lightning split the sky. From the pyre's flames rose light, not smoke, not fire, but radiance. Heracles ascended. He reached Olympus. The gods greeted him with respect. Even Hera, who had hounded him his entire life, accepted him as an equal. She set aside her enmity, and Heracles wed her daughter.
Hebe, goddess of eternal youth, now he is immortal.
Even in dreams his image endures. He became a constellation. His name is etched forever in the sky. He is a symbol not just of strength, but of a journey that begins in pain, leads through labors, and ends in transformation. Close your eyes. Picture the stars twinkling in the night sky. Somewhere there is Heracles, not a hero tormented by curses.
A god who found peace. He doesn't shout. He doesn't fight. He simply is. Calm, immortal. He guards your dreams, and you breathe evenly. You've heard the story of a great hero. Now you can sleep. All will be well. After Heracles left the
mortal world and took his place on Olympus, his story didn't end. On the contrary, it began anew. From that moment, he became more than a hero. He became a symbol, a legend believed and retold through the ages. His image rooted itself in human memory, becoming part of culture, customs, temples, art, and even the starry sky. When ancient Greeks gazed at the night sky, they saw more than points of light. They saw gods, monsters, and heroes. Among the constellations, they traced the figure of a mighty warrior with a club in hand, the constellation Hercules. It shines to this day, stretched between Lyra and Ophiuchus. It was a message from the heavens. Heracles' story is no fiction, no accident, but an eternal truth woven into the fabric of the cosmos. But Heracles' legacy wasn't confined to the sky, it endured on Earth. In the ancient Greek world, the cult of Heracles spread widely. He was revered as a protector hero, patron of athletes, wrestlers, and those overcoming hardship. Altars and shrines were built in many cities where offerings were made. He was especially honored in Thebes, his birthplace, where his journey began, and festivals and sacrifices were held in his name. Yet the cult of Heracles varied across Greece. In some places he was worshipped as a god, with prayers offered as to deities. In others, he was a human hero, an example of resilience and spiritual strength. Some invoked him in times of danger to protect cities, ward off calamity, or inspire feats. Others turned to him with personal pleas for strength, patience, or healing. Heracles held a special place in the Olympic Games. Who better to embody the ideal athlete? His perseverance, courage, and ability to overcome pain defined him. Statues of Heracles adorned gymnasiums, stadiums, and training halls. Young men, before competing, often spoke words in his honor, hoping his spirit would grant them endurance. Later, the cult of Heracles extended beyond Hellas. When Rome inherited Greek culture, it adopted not only gods but heroes. Thus Heracles became Hercules. His story gained new life in Latin with a Roman accent. Emperors referenced Hercules, depicted him on coins, and some even sought to emulate him. In Rome, Hercules became one of the most popular figures in public art. His image graced bathhouse walls, mosaics, columns, and forum reliefs. He was more than a hero, a symbol of labor's yielding results. The image of a strong, enduring, yet human demigod resonated with Roman ideals of masculinity. Despite changes in name and form, the essence remained. Heracles' stories spoke of how even the strongest can suffer, that greatness is not the absence of pain but the courage to push through it, that a hero is not one who never falls but one who rises each time. In Stoic philosophy, Heracles held a unique place. Stoics, sages teaching emotional control, patience, and inner strength, saw him as an embodiment of their principles. He didn't chase pleasure, he didn't shy from hardship, he fulfilled his duty even when unbearable, even when suffering, even when dying. Thus, the myth of Heracles became a moral lesson for all, from philosophers to humble farmers. His life reminded them, everyone faces trials, everyone carries burdens, but those who persevere reach eternity. The myth also permeated poetry, theatre, and epics. His name appears in Hesiod and Pindar, Sophocles and Euripides. His image inspired artists and sculptors from antiquity to the Renaissance. Heracles became part of Europe's collective imagination. His labours were retold in the Middle Ages and modern era, enriched with new details, metaphors, and interpretations. Even in Christian tradition, some of Heracles' traits found echoes. His suffering for redemption, battle against evil, and sacrifice paralleled the image of a martyr or saint in the new culture. At its simplest, Heracles became an image of strength accessible to all, not supernatural but human. Strength shown in rising each morning despite fatigue, in continuing despite doubts, in helping others even when it's hard. Now that you know his entire journey, from birth to immortality, you can feel a piece of him within you. You don't need to be a mythical hero. It's enough to be steadfast on your own path. Look at the sky. Among countless constellations, a mighty warrior shines, silent. But in silence lies strength. That's him, Heracles, the hero who endured all. And as you close your eyes, resting after a long day, know he's here, in every breath, in every star, in every step toward light. Sleep soundly. Tomorrow is a new day. Today you heard a story that's lived thousands of years, and now it lives in you. Having completed the tale of Heracles' labours and his journey from mortal hero to immortal god, one question remains. What can we take from this story for ourselves? Myths aren't just tales of deities and monsters. They're stories about people, their struggles with circumstances, themselves, and the world. Heracles is no exception. He became a living example of finding strength and courage in the toughest trials. One of the greatest lessons from Heracles' life is that we all face challenges, but overcoming them requires conquering inner barriers. Heracles wasn't perfect. He wasn't invincible. He fell. He erred. He was vulnerable, like anyone. But his vulnerability was his strength. He showed that being a hero doesn't mean never feeling pain, fear, or doubt.
A hero is one who keeps moving forward despite all. Heracles' life is not just labours, but a constant battle with inner demons. He made mistakes, sometimes letting anger and jealousy lead to disaster. But through those mistakes, he learned and
grew stronger. This is a vital lesson for us. We shouldn't fear errors. They're part of the journey. They help us grow and open new horizons. When facing hardship, remember, overcoming it makes you stronger and wiser. Another key lesson is the value of humility. Despite his strength and greatness, Heracles never placed himself above others. He was always ready to help those in need, whether a lowly mortal or gods he saved from evil. His true strength lay in serving others. This reminds us that greatness isn't always about outward glory. True strength is in sensitivity to others, in serving without pride or arrogance. Heracles also shows that life isn't always fair. Sometimes we bear the consequences of others' mistakes, as with his tragic fate and Hera's curse. Yet he kept seeking meaning in his actions. Life can be unjust, and instead of blaming circumstances or others, we must find the strength to continue. We can't control everything that happens, but we can control our response. Another quality Heracles embodies is resilience. He never gave up. He fought to the end, enduring pain, suffering, and loss. This is vital in any life. We all face setbacks and disappointments, but each new day offers a chance to grow. Heracles taught us that every step forward is a victory, even if hard won. Yet despite their grandeur, Heracles' labors weren't the most important part of his journey. He teaches us that value lies not just in victories, but in what we do with them. It's not enough to succeed. We must be worthy of those successes. Heracles sought not glory, but redemption, aiming to atone for his sins. This reminds us, no matter how often we err, what matters is striving to be better and do good. Now that you know his story, recall his immortality. Heracles became part of not just myths, but the cosmos. He's forever part of the great cycle where every heroic act gains
eternity.
His image became a star in the heavens, his labors an example for generations. Heracles reminds us that deeds, even those not world-shaking, can endure. They let us live through any trial. As you close your eyes, preparing for sleep, consider every step, every overcome hardship, every mistake is not just part of your life, it is your journey, your labor. Like Heracles, you can find the strength and courage to conquer all before you. Breathe deeply and think, even if you feel tired, doubtful, or afraid, you're capable of more. Each day is a chance to take another step. Life is a journey, and every path can lead to light if we walk through the dark. Good night. May your dreams be light and inspiring. And remember, like Heracles, you are the hero of your story.